Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will inspire you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very excited to have with me Jenna Udenberg. And let me talk to you a little bit about Jenna. She is an inspiring author, disability advocate, and accessibility educator. Diagnosed with juvenile arthritis at 7 years old, Jenna has faced life's challenges with incredible resilience and determination. As a 2020 Bush Fellow, she uses her voice to create more inclusive and accessible spaces for everyone. Her book, Within My Spokes, shares heartfelt stories of perseverance, healing, and the relationships that shaped her journey. Jenna's work through her nonprofit Above and Beyond with You is transforming lives by championing inclusion and breaking barriers. So please join me as we talk today about stories of strength and spokes, championing disability advocacy. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Jenna Udenberg. So happy to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here, Vicki. Looking forward to our time together today.
You know, for years and years, especially once I moved to Georgia in '86, I became involved with Special Olympics. And as a project manager for UPS, it was interesting. A lot of my projects later in my years, and I've retired since 2018, but later it was just the start of, we had focus on disability movement, that type of thing. But in the later years, and since I retired, it's now getting to the point for how do I make my computer program, my website more accessible. So I love having people on to talk about, educate everyone. How can we make lives for everyone more accessible and enjoyable? So before we get into this very important conversation, I ask two questions always. The first is just tell everybody, what part of the country do you live in? Where do you call home?
Yeah, I'm coming to you today from the North Shore of Minnesota, so on beautiful Lake Superior, in a little rural town called Two Harbors. It's Grandma's Marathon, 26.2 miles north of Duluth. So those that are familiar with the geography of Minnesota, some people call it God's country because it's just beautiful nature and creation and just being out and all the greatness of what Lake Superior brings. So
yeah, it's interesting. I've been there in the summer, and I thought, oh, this is awesome. And then I was there in the winter. I always tell people I went on to visit a client whenever I was at my company before UPS, and we were driving through the country. It was so beautiful, snow everywhere, and I saw a line on houses above the door. And I said, "What's that line?" And they said, "Oh, that's the snow line." It's like the snow,
wow.
it's that deep. Dude, I'll never move. It's on my list. Never move here.
Right. Yeah, winter is not for the faint of heart, especially in northern Minnesota. Although the Twin Cities have been getting hammered the last couple of years, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's so interesting. So we'll just really talk about this important topic by asking you to share a little bit more. I only gave the highlights of your story, but talk about your journey, um, and really, what were some aha moments that said, I need to be that voice. I need to be able to educate and inform people so that life can be better for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Reader Digest version, being diagnosed at age 7 and then being in a wheelchair by age 8, like as a kid, you don't know any different. My family didn't know any
Yeah.
different about, juvenile, at that time, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so you just live life, right? You rent your first little pediatric wheelchair, which they didn't even have pediatric chairs at that time because this was
No.
1988. So it was like, old medical world versus current medical world. Um, and you kind of just get thrown in. And so I'm very thankful for some really wise advice that my family received from physical therapists and that kind of stuff along my early
Yes.
days. Because there's well-intentioned people and entities and agencies and organizations. But sometimes those well-intentions can set your trajectory in not necessarily healthy and successful ways.
Yeah.
So they just really help my parents be even more protective of me as far as like, these people are going to come and say that she needs surgeries. Well, once you start doing surgeries at a young age, you can guarantee you're gonna do them forever. And
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't have my first orthopedic surgery until I was 15. Some of the backstory to that is that our band room was not accessible in our high school.
Oh.
And so I had to take a track chair. So picture like an army tank, but made out of rubber for the treads. And then there was just like a grocery cart handle that had two little pins that would connect to my handlebars in the back of my manual chair. And then they'd have to pop a wheelie with me to lock it in, and then they would literally like dump me over the beginning of the stairs, and the tracks would never line up equally.
Uh,
So then, like every
oh.
eighth stair, me and my
Oh.
chair and the whole device would jolt. So, long story short, we thought that I was just going to go in for an arthroscopy in my knee, clean things out, check on the status, all the things. Got knocked out, woke up, and I was like, wow, this is the easiest surgery to ever wake up from. And the surgeon was like, actually, we didn't do anything because once we knocked you out and got some better scans, we noticed that actually you thought that it was a miracle and that your knees were working. In reality, your knees were completely fused, and I was actually moving through hairline fractures in my femur. So they literally just woke me up. I had to stay in the hospital for a couple of days until they got all the parts because putting knee replacements in a 15-year-old, thankfully my growth plates
Yeah.
had closed. Um, but yeah, and it wasn't like you could just Amazon your knee replacement back in 1995, 96, right? Um, and so that really started my journey of surgeries. And so I had to start having surgeries probably every 6, 9, and 12 months, just because I was like a
Mm.
hot mess of Jenga. So once you fixed one part, then the rest of the body was
Yeah.
compensating, which then meant the next part. And so, hats off to my former surgeons because they really put Humpty Dumpty back together again and kind of started the Bionic Woman story. So in that, of course, I had to become a self-advocate. I had to speak up for myself. I had to become very in tune with my body, right? Like 3 times a week,
Yeah.
driving to Duluth for physical therapy and occupational therapy. How are you today? What is in pain? What number is this? Like you get very well in tune
Yeah.
to your body, at least in that sense, because it's just a constant
Yeah.
barrage of tell me all the things. Let's collect this data. Um, and, my family always taught us that, when you get into a space, you leave it better than you found it. And so throughout my journey, that really shaped, who I am, what I believe in, the work ethic that I bring to, all things, part of the type A, part of the stoicness, part of the stubbornness, part of the perfectionist at times. It's all good, it's all bad, all at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Um, and like when I was in high school, I was a peer helper, I was a peer counselor, I was, all those different things in student leadership, lead trumpet player, like I said about, the band room. And, I had people that invested in me, that saw me for me, that not only saw my
Nice.
gifts and talents and the things that I could potentially become, but they also just saw me as a human. And it wasn't, oh, there's little Jenna in a wheelchair,
Mm,
or here's the pity, or here's the whatever. Um, and it wasn't all roses. It wasn't all rainbows and puppies and unicorns, right? There were other adults in my life that were oppressive, that were discriminatory, that were negative, that were
mm,
ignorant, that were really ruthless, both to my family and my parents, and, let alone me as a student and a child. And I was protected by a lot of that, and a lot of, those memories are gone. They once were wounds, but now
mm,
they're just scars, and I'm very thankful for that.
mm. Yeah.
Um, but I had an amazing middle school band director, and she really inspired me to do that. So to become a middle school band director. So I went on and got a double degree, instrumental and vocal. So I was a music
Mm.
educator on the North Shore of Minnesota for about 19 years, serving
Wow.
in parochial schools, public schools, and a community charter school. Loved it. Middle school band was my bee's knees. I also got a jazz studies minor. So I loved everything middle school.
Yeah.
Not always their attitude or sarcasm, but
Yeah. My
some.
husband, my husband was a middle school teacher all his career,
Oh,
so
okay.
over 40 years. So yeah,
Wow.
he loved it too.
Yeah, we're a different breed. Anytime you say you're a
Hmm.
teacher and you say middle school, everybody's like, "Oh,
Oh,
you're one of
that's
them."
exactly
Okay.
exactly right. It is
Um,
exactly right.
yeah, but I loved it, because you can borrow their energy or steal their energy. Um, and eventually in my career, I became a K-12 general music teacher, did a few years as a choral teacher. So I kind of used it all from beginning to end. I started an adaptive music program, and that was probably the gem of my whole career. And really
Yeah.
was transformed by working with those students and families and other colleagues. And that really helps me be a better advocate and activist and accessibility educator now. So what got me to where I am in that sense is I was working from home during the pandemic, and the school
Mm.
district came back and said, we're no longer interested in accommodating your work from home order. So unexpectedly, that August, like a week before I was supposed to go get my classroom back and ready, that order came through. And so then it was another 3 months of lawyering and unioning and doing all the things to end that career. And it was a really hard shift. It was a very hard
Yeah.
identity crisis for a little while.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, I remember cleaning up my music room where I was teaching from. And when I bent down to pick up an instrument to put it away, I was given the words accessibility educator. And I had never thought about the fact that that career isn't done. It's just going to be pivoted. It's going to be
Different.
refocused. Right.
Yeah.
And all of those skills, all of that, restoring dignity, bringing about
Yeah.
education and different perspectives, amplifying voices of the marginalized that aren't heard,
Mm.
all of that is still definitely ingrained in me. And so now I say, my parents taught me about making spaces better, leaving them better than you find them. And now
Yeah.
my goal as a human is that I want to leave spaces and people better
Yeah.
off than when I found them. And then the same thing happens to me, right? Because it's all symbiotic and we're
Hmm.
all
Yeah.
interconnected and interdependent. So I've always wanted to write a book. I shouldn't say always wanted to lead a nonprofit because it's a lot of work
It's a
in
lot of work.
establishing and sustaining. But this work is just so important. And as I was doing my Bush Fellowship, that also is an interesting side note, because, the tagline for Bush Fellowship is think bigger, think differently. And so in 2019, as me and my cohort and 700 people other were applying for this and going through, series after series of the application process, you were challenged to think differently. And so I, as a manual wheelchair user, had never flown before. And I was like, all
Wow.
right, I want to wheel in all the spaces that the trailblazers have gone before me. I want to go to Berkeley, California and see Ed Roberts' spaces and where he was
Mm.
wheeling and breathing and changing lives, and where Judy Heumann wheeled and has changed not only our
Mm.
country, but the world for accessibility. And I wanted to go to Champaign-Urbana, one of the biggest rehab centers, in a town in Florida that just completely did a whole rehaul, and everything is accessible, and every door has a button, and all bathrooms are wheelchair friendly. And then I was like, well, if I'm dreaming big and thinking different, I want to go to Sweden because it's the most accessible country in the world. For
Yeah.
many years they've won that
Many
title.
years. Yeah.
And their climate is so much like northern Minnesota. So it's like if there are things that they're doing infrastructure wise and other ways that can be more sustainable, why not learn from them and with them instead of always trying to reinvent the wheel the American way, doing it harder and more expensively every time, right? But yeah, then March 2020 happened, and I got the phone call from my principal, and he said, you need to go home, take everything with you, and you are not allowed back in this school because I don't want you to die. And we don't know what's going on. And I had just gotten out of an orthopedic surgery, so my system was already still a little
Yeah.
um
Susceptible.
right. And yeah, so life totally changed. Some of my so then when we were told that we were actually a Bush Fellow, we weren't allowed to tell anybody. So like if you're married or, have a significant other, you're allowed to tell like one or two other people. But as a singleton, I was like,
Nobody can know.
well, okay. So I had a few ladies that were near and dear and kind of my prayer partners in that whole process, and then my siblings and my parents. And so I said, I will
Yeah.
send you a picture so you will know one way or the other, but you can't tell anybody. So in my book, you'll see that there's a picture of me kissing a can of Bush's baked beans. So that was my way of saying, hey, I got it. I can't tell anybody for 9 weeks, but
Nice. Nice.
but even in
Mm.
that, I had to hire a disability lawyer because with disability services and having income assets, or asset income limits, um, it was just a struggle. So even in that, like this is a huge prestigious award that only people in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and the 23 tribal nations in that geographic area can be a part of. And it's like, and I still couldn't accept it. So it was like 6 months of just trying to figure out the systems, making sure I wouldn't lose the roof over my
Yeah.
head, making sure I wouldn't lose my PCAs, making sure I wouldn't lose my health insurance. Like,
Yeah.
and then it was just like, but it kind of made me righteously angry as well because it's like here the other 25 Bush fellows, they're off living their life. They're off living out their
Mm.
fellowship. They're off doing XYZ. And then even in that part of it was self-care. So it was once a month you need to go on a self retreat, whether it's just an
Mm.
overnight or a day or whatever. And even in that, there weren't lodges, resorts, anything that could meet my needs within a 3 to 5 hour area.
Wow.
And again, it was
Wow.
during the pandemic, so there was some
Mm.
other, like I didn't want to be in a hotel setting and, all that kind of stuff. But then it just showed the Bush Foundation that the work that I was being called to do was even more important and very eye raising and perspective increasing for them.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was, in hindsight, it was great the way that my fellowship happened. It's a 2 year process, and once a fellow, always a fellow. But in that 2 year process, I made more connections online and figured out this new way of life
Yeah.
that would far be more sustainable and more outreaching. Like, do I still wish I could have gone to Berkeley? Absolutely. Do I wish I could have gone to Sweden? Yes and no, because it's scary. But knowing that 100 wheelchairs a day are broken by airlines, that,
Yeah.
that needs to change. And people are working on it, but it's 35 years after the Americans with Disability Act. I would hope we would have been a lot farther than we are, but um, we're getting there, and that's what matters. The next step, the next wheel forward. But in that being said, I would have loved to have those memories and to be in those spaces, but I think the relationships that I've been able to build and the connections that continue, plus, having my memoir written within my spokes, going through that whole process, cementing who I am, cementing where I've been and where I've come from, and that I was given the word tapestry very early on in my writing process. And with that,
Mm.
it's like this book isn't just Jenna's story. This book is the
Yeah.
story of all of the lives that come together that have helped make me who I am and how I've been used to help make others who they are. And
Yeah.
every single one of us have that. So I just really appreciate that word and the work that that does. But then it's funny because people will stop me on the street and be like, "Oh, you're Jenna. I read your book." And then they'll be like, "Yeah, this story about dot dot dot." And I was like, "I shared that story." It's a labor of love for so long, but then it's like I don't want to, keep reading it or whatever. Like I lived it. I don't need to read it. But
Oh, so funny.
my favorite story is two of my friends that I actually use their names, Jamie and Megan. They have relatives or friends or, colleagues that come up to them like, "Oh, Megan, I read your book." And she's like, "Oh, Jenna's book that I happen to be in like a chapter or so of." And they're like, "Jamie, I read your book." And she's like, that's Jenna's book and Jenna's story that yes, that I'm a part of. And, but that's exactly what I wanted to have happen. Because getting back to your original question, it was
Yeah.
like I've never wanted to be the target, or I've never wanted to be just the person on the stage or the only
No.
story or voice that's being shared. I happen to find myself in those spaces a lot just because I am articulate and highly educated and don't know when to be
Mm.
quiet. So, so there's that. Um, but then also I think just teaching, when especially in the music world, right? Like I'm just used to you
Yeah,
prepare in the
for
quiet
sure.
and you show up on the stage and you do your work.
Yeah,
And I'm just used to talking to kids. I'm used to talking to adults, older adults, all
that's
the
right.
things. So
Mm.
yeah, it's been a great journey. It's been a hard journey. And it continues. Like it felt weird at 43 to write my memoir. And now at 45, it's like, well, I still hope there's a lot of life left because I need a lot more education. There's a lot of lessons I still need to learn and to be a part of.
Well, I'm
So
67 and still doing it, so you got lots of time, lots of time. So you talked about word a few minutes ago. Why is disability still today thought of as a bad word? And why is it not a bad word?
yeah, you know, as an educator, we're always, and just in human development, right? We're always taught with labels.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Vicky, grab the red crayon. Oh, nope, that's purple, honey. Find the red crayon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so inherently, in order for us to learn, there are labels, there are characteristics. We are taught, one of these things is not like the other one. Back to our Sesame Street days and
So
reading Rainbow and, like,
oh yeah,
you
taking me
know,
back.
I'm here for you. Um, so I think part of it is we have to acknowledge that that's how we learn. That's
Yeah.
how we understand life around us. And yet, that's oversimplifying. And yet, if we get stuck there, then
Mm,
we're living out the life and then we start to judge. Well, is
mm,
that purple crayon better than the red crayon? Well, no, because I thought the purple was red. And then I was told that no, that's incorrect. So, I think what we lift up and elevate in our minds, what we lift up and elevate in our promotional world, in the
Mm,
movies, in our ads, in our society, if you're blue-eyed, blonde-haired, physically fit, doing all the things, inherently unknowing and in a bias to us, we see that as XYZ, depending on our culture, depending on, all the things.
right.
Um, and not once, at least in my 45 years, have I seen outside of disability culture and community where, oh, that disabled person, that's up here. That blind person,
Mm,
that's up here. That person that's using American Sign Language or some other version of sign language, that's up here.
yeah.
And that shapes who we become. And like even, I don't know, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I was wheeling through a retail store and I just stopped in my tracks because I was like, in that ad above that rack of shirts for little kids is a little girl showing off her flower shirt. And it was just like, wow, that was the first impact that I had ever had where everybody says representation matters. Like that was my first aha of this is what other minority groups mean. Because
Mm,
even throughout all the different ad campaigns and all the different, it's like disability is always left last. Even
mm,
in, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. When some
mm,
of us that are championing for the A to be there for accessibility, a lot of times we
yeah.
get the, oh, well, that's there, honey. That's in equity or that's in diversity. And it's like, why can't we ever
Mm,
stand alone? Why
yeah.
is it always XYZ? Even when we talk about universal design and the curb cut effect, why do we always have to add mothers with strollers? Why do we always have to add XYZ of some non-disabled community member
Yeah.
benefiting them?
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. It can and often does benefit others. Has anybody used an electric toothbrush today? Oh, well, that came out of disability culture. Like
Mm,
there are just so many things in which we all benefit from, but we don't include the actual lives that are the reasons in which we have these new devices or have these new processes or have work from home or have, you know,
yeah.
all of these things, or even like the note-taking scribes that we use on our Zoom calls or,
Mm-hmm.
screen readers, taking um, voice to text on your cell phones to send a text to somebody using your voice. Like almost all of these applications come out of disability culture and
Yeah,
community. And
for sure.
I I think we just continue to see it as limitations. We continue to see it as medical model instead of societal model.
Hmm.
It's a very complex situation, but I think the more that we can just say, oh, I don't want to think that way anymore. Disability is not a
Hmm.
bad word. And for me, like I hate the word handicap. I have never
Yeah,
played
for
golf in my
sure.
life. I am not a golf terminology. Um, and it was funny at one of my schools I taught at with one of my sisters who was a special ed pair at the time. I was rolling along at like on my orientation day and I looked at the door and it said handicap toilet. And I just had to wheel through the door opening. I'm like, so what's its disability? Like, why is the toilet handicap? And my sister was like, you dork, you know what it means. And I'm like, I know, but in the way that you're using that label. And, so I think we just have to be open. And yet also, all of us are on a journey with our disability. So, I mean, I've been in a chair for almost 38 years now. And
Mm,
so I'm used to it. I'm, a veteran at it. I'm skilled at it. But there are still situations that I get flabbergasted. I had an interaction at a retail store last week, and I came in and I can use my legs and arms to ambulate because all four of my appendages are impacted by my arthritis. And I literally fought through getting through a door, and an older white gentleman who was behind the desk had enough chutzpah to say, well, that's odd that you're using your feet and your arms. because I thought the whole point of using a wheelchair is that you don't have to put weight through your feet or some kind of comment like that. And I was like, we are in 2025. And just because you think it doesn't mean you should say it.
Yeah.
And disability presents in a whole host of different ways.
Yeah.
And then the hard part was even after I did my educator spiel of kind of what I just said to you, it was like he still continued to say two or three like very ignorant, discriminatory type comments. And I was like, I was just rolling around, having an amazing, independent, beautiful, sunshiny day. And here came your
Until.
tornado, right? Of like, you know,
Mm,
so it's just confronting that and challenging others to think about what do they truly mean when they say disability?
mhm.
What do they mean when they're saying
Yeah.
other older terms or archaic terms? And I think the heart behind it is what's most important. We all mess up, we all screw up, especially when it's not our wheelhouse of our disability,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But it's that heart and intention. And if you've been in a minority group for long enough, you get pretty good at reading people's body language and the intentions
Yeah.
behind their word versus yep, you screwed up. I screwed up today too. You know?
We all do. Yeah, we
Yeah.
all do. I've interviewed several people now that are blind.
Mm,
And in the beginning, I was talking about the technology. And you mentioned the voice to text and uh, both of them, no, I guess two guys and a lady,
mm,
but they all use that technology to get the calendar invite, to
mm,
be able to send me information by texting out that, and everything works seamlessly. They have somebody that sets up their lighting and everything for the podcast
mm.
so that it all works wonderfully. And
Nice.
each time I think how early on in my career, we would have thought, well, that person's going to be stuck at home just with nothing to contribute. And all
Right.
of these people had so much to contribute that it,
Mm,
it was just such a blessing that we came up with this technology to be
mm,
able to make it accessible. And I think that word accessible just has to be always thought about in everything that we do.
right.
Um, and so whenever you think about it, accessibility and inclusion in this 21st century, what else do you think, as I'm sure you sit back and think, what if, what else do you think that we should be tackling to really help? And just a thought came across. I interviewed a gentleman who was a war veteran, and he
Mm,
created a knife that was for his challenges. I said to him, that knife would be perfect for, I would buy that knife. I mean, it's like, it
right.
was more towards people that were older too, that didn't
Mm,
have the strength in their arms. I said, if I'm chopping a lot of things, my arms get tired too. So
yep.
I think we have to start thinking of that way and not thinking, well, it will cost more to do that, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I
So,
think finding that innovation, I mean, disabled people have to be innovative and accommodative every single moment of their
yeah.
day, you know, and and just the way that our brain functions too. Like two of my other big ha-has in my career, I had one of my administrators was a good friend of mine, and he's like, "Can we talk about your body language for a second?" And I'm like, "Okay." And so then I had that talk
Oh.
also with my occupational therapist, and she's like, Jenna, you've just lived in your body, and like I have an elbow that is fused, so it's fused straight. So I hold my arms differently, and
Hmm.
so and I don't think my administrator, framed it that way. I think then I read his body language, and then the next time we had a meeting, I came back and I was like, "Hey, I had this great conversation with my OT," and I'm like. Here's the deal. If I can get my body in a comfortable position, meaning I'm popped back in a wheelie, I am leaning back, I've met all of my body's needs, so then my brain can be active and engaged in our
Oh
conversation.
yeah.
But in
Yeah.
non-disabled, body language reading, if I did this from the beginning of our thing and you could see my whole body in our conversation right now, you'd probably be like, the back of your brain would be like, Jenna's unengaged. She's leaning back. She's not really with us. And it's like, but in my world, for my body mind, this is what means I'm fully with Vicki at this moment. I'm fully
Yeah.
present. Versus a thing like this, it's like,
I just was thinking, you look so much more comfortable and natural that way. It's like you should have did that from the start. Oh my goodness.
right.
Yeah.
And then the other aha was, oh, as especially as a wheelie and somebody who needs assistance in different aspects of life, I'm always thinking 4 steps ahead. But I always would be in meetings and like, I'm an introvert by heart. You wouldn't know it by the way I talk, but I sit back quietly, observe the things, and then when I'm ready to
Yes.
speak, then it's like, all right, now I'm ready to speak and share the things. Doesn't mean I'm right, it just means here's another perspective that maybe you haven't thought about or
Nice.
haven't heard. And usually I'm thinking 4 steps ahead. So I'm
Hmm.
already down the field waiting to catch the ball for the touchdown, and they're still lacing up their shoes and in the locker room, right? And not one is better than the other. It just is.
Different. Hmm.
But I would be seen unknowingly to me early on in my leadership time of like, oh, Jenna's like the Debbie Downer. She's like the
Oh,
one poking the holes. And I was like, oh, that was never even a part of my thought process. It's like, here's my superpower, even though I don't like being, the superhero, all that kind of stuff that sometimes happens with disability stuff either. But like, here's my skill set, let's use it.
yeah.
So throw something out at me to say, like, hey, Jenna, what do you think about this a month from now? Okay, well, if this is what you want, let's get here by doing this. Let's do backward design. Because again, the educator in
Yeah.
me, it's
That's,
like, here's how we
yeah.
get there. But then here's also the trade-offs or the pros and cons or, the obstacles that you might have to overcome. But then in that, sometimes when I'm working with some of my robotics co-coaches and that kind of stuff, they're like, perfect is the opposite of done. And I'm like, but getting it done and not done well is adding more work later. So it's always that trade-off of learning, in those different
Right.
leadership settings of what's going to best serve us now and what's going to best serve us in the long
Hmm.
run. And
Yeah.
if you just need me to not share the 4 steps ahead, that's fine. But let's have that conversation so then I can try to close a few tabs and give you the best thing ahead. So,
Mhm. And it's interesting, as a project manager for many, many years, I loved the first phase of projects was the information gathering. And it
mhm,
amazed me how people, I'm giving them the time. I'm here, open ears, just absorbing everything, and they just want to go to the solution. It was
right.
no, let's break it down, like you said, reverse engineering. What's not working? What do
Hmm.
you do? That's always a great question. Well, what's your process? What do you do? Walk me through it. And they're like, why do you want to know? And it's like, no, just walk me through it. I just, everything.
Hmm.
And I did process mapping. And it was always as we were going through it that, oh, I didn't realize I
Hmm.
was, and it's like we just do so many things on autopilot
Yeah.
that, and a lot of times we don't realize they weren't even necessary or they're the things that's holding us back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
My one good friend who has done a lot of that kind of work too, she's always like, so how's that serving you? Thanks. Thanks, friend. I got the point. Yep, that's not serving me. All right, let's learn a new way. It'll take a little longer. It'll be more work, but yes.
yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, we covered so much today. I have enjoyed our conversation immensely. You just are a wonderful human being to chat with and to really start to let us think more about what we do, how can we do it better to serve all, not
Hmm.
just, you know, a certain group or individual, and not think of it as more work or more money, but just
Hmm.
better. my whole, we're so aligned. I mean, my whole career now is about trying to make people's lives better, live better, look better,
Mm.
feel better. And you are way ahead of me. One last question. Are there any tools that can make sure that accessibility and inclusion in this environment, as you said, because it can reach so many more people around the world, how can we help to make our online presence more accessible to others?
That's a great question. I guess I'll flip my answer a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, go
This,
ahead. I was just gonna say, if you think about it, as you're doing these things, what would
right.
be so much easier if, type of thing.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like, um, disabled people are not a checklist. We're a human like everybody else. And
Yeah.
so every situation is going to be different. So I think the biggest tool that anybody can use in any setting is curious questions
Mm,
and to
yeah.
have more open communication, and use a few more words, not to be wordy, but like, for instance, instead of being like, Jenna, what's your diagnosis? Right? Like,
Um,
hey, Jenna, if you feel comfortable answering this, I'm just wondering, how what brings you here today as a wheelchair user?
mm,
Or,
yeah.
like using a few more words to make it more humane, more
Mm,
dignified. And then also sharing that, right? Like, I'm really sorry. I know you are not to be my teacher of all things, but I also know Google is not the greatest source or AI or ChatGPT to figure out some of these things too. So if you would, you know, honor me by sharing us, an accessibility story or an accommodation
yeah.
story that impacted you, this is where I'm doing my work, and I would love to figure out how to do my work better, to be a better community
Mm,
leader, you know. And the other part of it is like, kind of in your lead up to the question is like, we're not an add-on. And you
yeah.
create more work and spend more money by making the ADA an add-on or only doing the floor of what ADA code is. And that's why Above and Beyond with You has the name it has, because you can go above and beyond code. But
Hmm.
but when you do that, you should have the disability voice and stakeholders as a part of it. So
Yeah, for sure.
it's really important, and I'm doing similar. Like, my wheelhouse is manual wheelchairs and mobility disabilities. My wheelhouse is not online accessibility or, screen readers or deafblind work or, all of that. Like, I want to be connected to all of the various parts of disability community and culture. And yet, I don't want to be a perpetuating problem because sometimes people want to speak for different aspects of disability that is not their lived experience. And a lot of
Perfect.
times that causes more harm.
Hmm.
So, answering your specific question, I love working with Maxwell Ivy. He's a new friend of mine in the podcast world. He's called the Blind Blogger, and he
Hmm.
has been amazing. He's like, "Hey, let's work together. Shoot me your website. Hey, I love this about your website. Maybe consider this. Hey, do you know this website to figure out color contrast?" So I think the more that we make authentic relationships in this podcasting
Yeah,
space, in technology space, and I would also challenge folks to make sure that there's people who are actually disabled in those consulting firms that are actually doing the training, that are actually a part of it, because I was a part of an organization locally. And I'm like, I'm here. I'm a member of your organization. I would love to help you with this building,
hmm,
remodel and creation and, you know, for free, right? Like, that should be my duty as a member of your organization. And like, no, no, we got it. We hired a disability consulting firm. And I was like, okay.
okay.
So then the building was created, and I talked to a friend of mine, and they're like, well, yeah, so we're actually related to one of the people. And I'm like, well, that's cool. So who in your family is disabled, or who in that firm is disabled? Oh, well, none of them. I was like, do you
Ah,
not see that as a
no.
problem? Like, thank
No.
you, non-disabled people, for being champions and being allies. But if that's where it stops and you're not employing people who are disabled
Yeah.
or, all of that, that's tricky as well. And I would
Hmm.
also, in that vein is like, because these are our life stories, you don't get our
Yeah.
life stories for free, nor should we be expected to share our diagnosis or expected to share what were the struggles we got through on our way here today, like, but
Hmm.
there's just this weird entitlement sometimes in non-disabled folks that they feel like because we're lesser humans, it's
Hmm.
their right to know these things. And it's different when we're in the setting you and I are in, because I'm signing up to say, hey, let's have this conversation and let's,
Hmm.
dive in. But when you're just out in the wild, as they
Not about
say,
right.
like
Yeah.
that isn't okay. And in a lot of spaces that are wanting to pay disabled people, it's also like being aware that our lives are very complex financially. And so
Hmm.
figuring out what's the best way to actually provide stipends or provide that financial thank you or that
Hmm.
gift that you're paying for their time and their story and their work. And it's complex because there are different tax laws and all the different things, but just making
Yeah.
sure that you're offering and it's a symbiotic relationship, not that you're coming to cause harm and do whatever
Right.
things with these stories, because
Hmm.
ultimately they're our story.
Yeah. So true. Well, I hope the audience has got as much out of your talk today as I have. It's been, as I said, just a joy to have you as a guest. And if anyone out there is saying, well, but how can I get in touch with Jenna? Well, if you watch that I have a slide that will share with you all the information. If you're listening, you can go to my website to get this information at Vicki Noethling. So please subscribe if you haven't. Again, the website is Above and Beyond with You. That's the letter U.org. Above and Beyond with You.org. Facebook is, if you just search for Above and Beyond with You, you'll find it. LinkedIn is Above Dash Beyond Dash with Dash You. Again, the letter U. Instagram, Above and Beyond with You. And Jenna is going to give you a little bit about her call to action today, information you can find on her website, as well as what she puts out there in social media that might be helpful to you and how often she's out there. So, Jenna, it's all yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say first and foremost, anywhere you buy books on Amazon or even through our website, you can get Within My Spokes, which is my memoir, and all the proceeds go to the work of Above and Beyond with You. So
Awesome.
you get to know more of our story. There's a chapter all about the creation of our nonprofit and the work that we do as well. We're in the middle of revamping our website to make sure that it is as accessible as it can be. So things you can find there are ways to connect with us, to stay informed by us, to if you want to work with us as far as consulting and training or public speaking, doing site audits, all of that kind of work. And social media, like Vicki said, we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I personally post a lot more on Facebook because I'm kind of in that demographic age-wise, but the rest of our social media team helps out with those other two areas. I also write for Lake County Press. So every other week, I publish a column called Local View from 4 foot 2. So it's all about disability perspective. And yes, I did measure how high my eyeballs were because I didn't want to be lying, but didn't want to just rhyme to rhyme, but local view from
Oh,
4 foot 2.
oh,
And we put those on we're going to start putting those on our website, but we do share those on Facebook and Instagram every other week when they're available. We love working with others. Again, earlier I said Above and Beyond is all about going above and beyond code, but I did forgot to share the with you means we believe in having a relationship long term. So it's not just a flash in the pan. It's not just a quick contract, but it's how can we work together to make this world a more accessible and inclusive place for everyone. And the U
mm.
stands for Udenberg. That's why it's not the word U, but the letter U, because my little kindergartners, 5-year-olds, could not pronounce Udenberg, and sometimes I struggle too. So that's why it's above and beyond with you, and we would love to connect and help out in any way that we can.
Awesome. Jenna, So, so cute. So good. I just think that you just are an inspiration. And, I think I actually worked or interviewed Maxwell early on in my
Oh,
podcasting
okay,
because
awesome.
the name sounds so familiar to me. Um, and, and then I started to flashback of all the things he did. And I'm thinking, oh, my website needs all these things. Oh my gosh. But,
Yep, we're all
um,
learning together. That's what's
yeah,
important. So,
yeah. Well, as always, thank you for being a great guest and remind everyone that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.